What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tuesday stream. Here on Twitch, I'm the Siege. For those of you who don't know me, welcome, I guess, if you're new. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about my newest and honestly favorite feature inside of FantasyCruncher. It's made a huge difference in my NBA play. Haven't bigged anything yet, but my lineups have just been more consistently better. More than just better, just good lineups correlated well, and it's due to fully understanding how randomness works and what I was doing wrong. So I'm going to do a quick, this is level 101 randomness. I could go down a rabbit hole of a rabbit hole of a rabbit hole. If you really want me to do it, we can do it some other day. But I just kind of want to show you the basics in what the randomness used to be, what it is in a lot of places still, other than here, and why I think that this change is so important. Would I use this for football? Yeah, football's a little bit more of a results-given, like more of a result-driven sport, so like baseball and whatnot, where projections are a little tougher, but you can absolutely use it the same way. So I'm going to use a projection of 50, randomness of 20%, and 150 lineups. Now, actually, you know what? Let me do 1,000 lineups, because they'll make it a little clearer. Right? So when I simulate this, we can see here, so 20% randomness on 50 is 10. So it gives you just random projections between 40 and 60 of equal weight. You know, and these charts, like if I did a big enough sample, these would level out, right? So basically, you're just picking a random number between it. So I normally run it 15 to 25 minutes before lock with the last ownership projections. Now, if news comes out, obviously I'll rerun it. I like time to filter down, so I will, if I'm playing 150, I'll build 180 and then kind of filter out the 1%ers that I'm going to be underweight on and just make it 0. So I can show you that one day, too. Someone asked me about that, and I haven't done it yet. I will at some point. Maybe I'll do it on a Saturday stream or something. I'll definitely do it. But I just want to show you the randomness here. So this is kind of your traditional bell curve right here, right? So instead of just having every projection be worth the same, because if you have a guy projected for 50, he's more likely to score 50 than he is to score 57 or 44. So this is the pro randomness, and it's your traditional bell curve, and it gives you a standard deviation here. So, I mean, if you need a reminder on standard deviations, you can go down the Twitter rabbit hole or the YouTube rabbit hole like I did to remember what a standard deviation was and all those good stats. But the key here is that what it does is it weights your projections correctly, right? So it's going to give you 50 the most, but sometimes it's going to give you 52, 53. And sometimes that really can matter. Now, again, if this is a more volatile player, right? So let's just say it's a 20, you have a guy projected for 20, but we know guys that put up 20 can go for, 10 or 50. Here's the problem, right? So if I only use 20% randomness on this, my range is between 17 and 22. That's not volatile enough. So I need to create a different randomness for every single player, because otherwise I'm not going to capture their true range of outcomes. So that was my biggest problem, is I was using a standard randomness number, but that was leading me to situations like this where my value plays, I wouldn't get enough of them because the range was too small. I need to make this range bigger. So if I need to make this 40%, so now my 20 guy can go between 14 and 25. Maybe that's not even big enough. Maybe I need 60% randomness. Make my guy go from 20 to 12. Because a guy who puts up 20 points can easily put up 12, and he can easily put up 28. So once I realized that I needed to be having different amount of randomness for each position, I realized, first of all, I could never go back to not having FantasyCruncher Pro. Congratulations, Dave. You got a customer for life. Because now, if I ever went back to the normal randomness, it would treat my projection as 8 the same as 20, which it absolutely can't be, but I also need to account for the times that he's going to put up 8 to 10. So what I realized then is I needed to create a randomness percentage for every single player. And so when I do that, now what I've done is I've used FantasyCruncher Pro, and there's a standard deviation right here. It's calculated for you. So I actually use standard deviation per 36, and then divide that by my projections. So for example, LeBron James, standard deviation 36, 10.43, divided by my projection of 47.84, gets me randomness of 21.8%. Does that make sense for LeBron? So let me just back test this, right? So if I plug in 47.8 and I plug in randomness of 21.4, I get a range of outcomes between 40 fantasy points and 55. Sounds about right. So again, this is how I'm using randomness to make better lineups. Does it really matter in the end? Good question. So I have loaded up my projections for today, and we're going to do a demo between if I just use classic randomness with my projections, and again, I'm going to use... Oh, the other thing to note here, I want to make this note, so pay attention. If I plug this at 19, and I have a player at 18 that I have a range of outcomes on, it's not going to include them in the calculation. So this requirement happens first before the range of outcomes. So if you want someone to be included, you have to bump them up to 19 and then cap them. So that's the one thing I did want to note. I was doing that wrong as well. So if I run 150 teams here, just with this is the under the old randomness style, you're going to see that my exposures are just all over the place. Don't really have any core plays, couple, but I'm all over the place. My projections, so these teams run from 325 points all the way down to 300 points here, or 278 at the bottom, right? This is what happens when you do normal randomness. And this is a 59.8 cap, so it's not like I'm not capping out the team. But that's way too... this team's terrible, right? 278 is just a bad score. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and turn it on the normal distribution randomness, and this problem is going to go away. So it's going to build me 150 teams. Notice how last time my highest owned guys was in the 60% range. Now I've got 99, 93, 84. So I'm building myself a core now. And that's because it's using a normal distribution curve as opposed to just randomly across the entire range that I've set up. I let the projections determine my player pool for sure. But by using this normal randomness, I'm also getting studs. I'm not going to... So for example, right, if we go back to... So I have my 150 teams here, right? And you can see Anthony Davis is my highest owned stud. I got some Devin Booker. But if I go back, right, to the classic randomness and rerun this, here's my problem. Notice how I'm running out of studs, right? Like, I don't have a stud that I'm taking a stand on. I'm all over the board. Anthony Davis, CJ McCollum, Drew Holiday. I'm all over the board. I'm not taking a stand anywhere. It's like basically play 10% of everyone. That's not helpful. In this case, I get to play 30% of everyone. But that's no good. Right? These teams are just worse. 299. So this is just simply better. Now I need to cap ownerships on these, right? So like, am I going to play 99% Kelly Oubre Jr.? Probably not, unless I have definitive word on Ricky Rubio, right? So I still have to institute some caps here based on ownership. But these teams are just better. They're just better built. Now you can also get rid of this too. If I go to advanced options, I go to my data and I select my projection and institute a minimum of 315. It will no longer generate any lineups below 315 points. So, whereas on this last crunch, for example, I had, teams ranging all the way down to 300 points. Or 275. Now, in this crunch, it will have 150 teams, but its lowest projected score will be 315. So you can see here, I have no teams below 315. And all I did there was just put a bottom cap on. So I think that's super important too. If you're using Cruncher and not doing that, I would be doing that immediately. Because otherwise, like, the teams towards your bottom are just projected like 40 points below your first team. And these teams are just nowhere near as good. So